Good evening, everyone. I will call to order this February 24th, 2022 meeting of the Public Traffic Safety Commission. And we will start with a flag salute by Commissioner Sullivan, please.
Please rise, face the flag, place your right hand over your heart, and say with me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And roll call, please.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Here.
Carter, Maddox,
Here.
Richardson,
Here.
and Sullivan.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. And so straight to public comment. Do we have public comment?
We do not have any
We
public
do
comment.
not. So we will go straight to consent calendar. And I will read the statement. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no discussion of these items unless members of the commission request specific items be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. A total of 30 minutes is provided for members of the public to address the commission on items that appear on the consent calendar. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Public comments may be made in person at the meeting by submitting a speaker card to the commission secretary or by submitting an email to be read aloud into the public record at the meeting. Email comments must be submitted to Public Traffic Safety Commission at Temecula.gov. Speaker cards for in-person comments will be called in the order received by the commission secretary, and then, if time remains, email comments will be read. Email comments on all matters must be received prior to the time the item is called for public comment. All public participation is governed by the council policy regarding public participation at meetings, adopted by resolution number 2021-54. And we have one item on the consent calendar, approve action minutes of January 27, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Sullivan, second by Ackerman, and roll call vote.
Commissioner Carter, Commissioner Ackerman,
Aye.
Maddox,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
and Sullivan.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. So we move on to business. Let's see. Do I need to read the statement here?
I don't believe you do.
Yeah, okay. So the business here is, item number 2 is budget engagement session, and this is a receive and file report, so we'll have the report.
No. While you're waiting for sound, I'd just like to congratulate you on a great year, mid-year budget realignment.
Thank you.
Give my condolences to Pat, who's got about 20 new projects sitting on
Yeah.
his desk.
He does. He's got his work cut out for him. Oh, now it's working. All right, well, we'll get started here. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm Jennifer Hennessy. I'm the finance director here. And this is something that we started doing last year, and we're continuing to do this year, which is to have a budget engagement session early on in the budget process with all the boards and commissions to get your input and kind of bring you up to speed on where we are at the budget. So we'll just jump right in. So if we can advance the slide. So we'll go through tonight. I'll give you a very high-level view of the budget process, some key budget policies that influence the way in which we make recommendations through the budget. I'll give you the highlights of both our annual operating budget and capital improvement program budget. And then there are some discussion questions at the end, but I'll also give you a little preview of what those are going to be. So next slide, please. So these will be the discussion questions at the end. So as we go through this presentation, keep these in the back of your mind as far as what we'll be discussing, that then I will summarize and bring forward to the council as part of our budget process. So the first question is, basically, as a commissioner, do you feel that the investment of financial resources is in line with the community's priorities from your vantage point and input that you've heard from the community over the past year? And if yes, what programs and projects are most beneficial to the community? And if not, how could the city better align its financial resources and spending to meet the needs of the community? So, next slide. So our budget process really begins in January of each year, and that's when we go through and do a thorough review of our current budget. We look at the trend that we're seeing in revenues and expenditures, and then we update our 5-year financial forecast. Next. And then what we do with that information is we bring forward a mid-year budget, which you're just mentioning. We did that on Tuesday. The mid-year budget is designed to kind of true up what we're seeing happening in the world of revenue. This particular mid-year budget was a very large one. We had lots and lots of adjustments, and that's primarily because when we closed out the prior fiscal year, our projections were a little bit different than how reality came in as far as revenues. So we ended up having pretty significant surpluses in all of our major funds, so those surpluses were programmed through this mid-year budget update. And then also, that's okay, also in February, we kick off the next fiscal year's AOB and CIP process. And then the budget engagement sessions occur between February and March. Then next. And then in March and April, that's really when staff gets very involved with developing our recommendations to the city manager to create what's called the proposed budget. And then the proposed budget, next, is presented to the council in May of each year at it's a daytime council workshop, and that's where we present in detail everything that's in the operating budget and the capital improvement program. And then council, if they have any changes that they'd like for us to incorporate into the adopted budget, we include those in, and then that comes back to the council in June. Next. And then in the first meeting of June each year, they adopt the annual operating budget and the CIP in order to have that all in place and adopted before the start of the next fiscal year. Next. And then throughout the year, we do ongoing analysis of both revenues and expenditures to make sure that they're in line with our projections. And if they're not, like what we saw with this mid-year, we make adjustments halfway through the year. Next slide. So there's several different elements and tools that influence what's included in the operating budget and the CIP, one of which is the community satisfaction survey. And about every 3 to 5 years, we do a widespread community satisfaction or community survey to gain the priorities, what's important, what's maybe not as important from the community, what's our overall rating. The last time we did that was in the middle of COVID. And the rating still came back very positive. So it really gives us a gauge as to where the community priorities are, and then that drives where we make recommendations for funding. We are doing the boards and commissions feedback, so that's the feedback I get from these sessions. I'll bring back and weave those into the proposed budget. And then the middle one there, the prior year carryover. Those are projects or programs that were funded in a previous fiscal year and maybe weren't completed. So the very first thing we do is we carry over those budgets to ensure that those come to completion in the fiscal year. And then there's various master plans throughout the city. There's a community services master plan. There's likely a traffic master plan. I'm getting the thumbs up from Pat. Those all influence, primarily where we recommend spending CIP dollars in different capital projects. And then finally, the council policies. So we reaffirmed with the council earlier in February the policies that are currently in place. They want to remain in place the next fiscal year, and we'll go over a couple of those tonight. And next, and then one more. So the key deliverables that come out of the budget process, the first step is the departments go through their operating budgets and capital budgets and make their recommendations for what to include in the next fiscal year budget. So that's their departmental requests. Finance consolidates all of those into what we call a preliminary budget. That's just an internal document that we use to present to the city manager, and we do that in the March-April timeframe. He makes his recommendations, and then if you can click next, his recommendations are represented in what's called the proposed budget, and that's what's presented to council in May at their budget workshop, and that's where, again, the feedback from these sessions will be incorporated into that proposed budget. And then next, in June, we do the final operating budget and capital improvement program budgets, and those are adopted by the council in first meeting in June. Next, please. So some of those policies that I mentioned, this is probably one of the most important policies in there, which is how do we spend any available fund balance that we have in the general fund? And for those who aren't familiar with some accounting terminology, the general fund is the city's primary operating fund. It's discretionary in nature, so long as any expenditures spent from the general fund have to serve a public purpose. So it's where we fund public safety and public works and community development administration. So it's the largest fund that we have. So we have this policy in place that the council just reaffirmed that says, here's the priorities on which we spend general fund surplus. The first priority is public safety equipment and non-recurring programs. So because a surplus is deemed one-time money, it's kind of, just a little savings account, if you will, we want to make sure that we're spending that on one-time expenditures. The next one is to boost our reserves for asset management. We have several funds set up to fund the replacement of cities' assets, so fleet, technology, facilities. We have different replacement funds set up. If we deem appropriate, we can recommend putting more money into those accounts so that they're there when the roof leaks or we have to replace some of the city's assets. So that's priority number 2. Third priority, CIP projects. We'll get into that more later. And then the fourth is to pay down some of the city's unfunded liabilities that we have related to the pension, as well as something called OPEB, which is post-employment benefits, so retiree health, things of that nature. And then finally, to pay down or invest in a program that reduces city's debt. Next, please. So we also have a budget policy in place surrounding Measure S. So Measure S is a 1-cent sales tax that was approved by the voters in 2016, became effective in 2017. It generates anywhere, right around $30 million a year for us. It's separated from the general fund, although for all intents and purposes, it's as general as the general fund, and it can be appropriated just as long as it serves a public purpose. But for transparency purposes, we keep it in its own fund. And the appropriation guidelines adopted by council follow a similar priority as the general fund, but the top priority obviously is going to be public safety. Second is the asset management, to make sure that we have enough funds to maintain our city over the long term. Third priority is capital improvement projects, and then the fourth is general services, which incorporates our community services division. And this pie chart is the most up-to-date appropriations from Measure S. We had some carryover budget, that's why it's in the 51 million range. And you can see sort of the proportionate distribution of those funds. They may not look like they follow the priorities, but they follow the priorities as far as how they're appropriated and where the needs are. But with that extra surplus, we added, like you said, several CIP projects, so that skewed the CIP portion of the pie chart to be about 53%. And as time goes on, as costs for public safety or community services increases, that proportionate share will grow to fund both of those two segments, and there'll be less and less money available for capital projects over time. Next slide, please. So now we're looking at the general fund. This is a summary of the general fund revenue projection. It's the highest it's ever been in the city's history, almost 103 million. That does include a one-time infusion of American Rescue Plan Act money that had to deal with COVID. That the amount in here is about 7 million. The chart, however, the graph there excludes that ARPA funding just to show sort of our baseline and our ongoing revenues and to show you what the trend has been and what we're projecting it to be. The good news on this slide is that revenues consistently outpace expenditures, meaning we're structurally balanced. And you can kind of see the little dip that occurred in 2019. That was obviously from COVID. We experienced about a 3.5% loss in revenue, which, on the chart looks pretty bad. But in reality, we thought we would lose over 9%. So it wasn't as bad as we had anticipated. And you can see that we've really rebounded pretty rapidly, and we're right back on the same trajectory we were before the pandemic. So, it's really, for most, in most ways, we've fully recovered from that pandemic. So, next slide, please. So, general fund expenditures, a little over 84 million, and this is the distribution between all the major departments that the general fund funds. Public safety is by far the biggest piece of the pie. We've got about 57% of the general fund going towards police and fire. Public works, about 19%, community development, 8%, and then administration, which includes the city manager's office, city attorney, finance, HR, city clerk, all of the administrative functions within the city. So again, just over 84 million, which is quite a bit less than our 102 million in revenue, so thereby, having that excess there. Next slide, please. So this slide is very important to people like me. It helps me sleep at night. This shows our fund balance and our reserve levels. So the blue bars show the general fund balance, which we're hovering right under 50 million. Our reserves, we have several different types of reserves, but the takeaway from this is that our reserves are fully funded, not only this year, but for the ensuing 5 years, with plenty of surplus over and above those reserve levels. So that it just illustrates the strong financial position that the city is in. We've worked very hard to get to this point, and for the foreseeable future, it looks like, all will stay as strong and, barring an economic crisis like we just went through, but you can see we weathered that storm fairly well. So it's a very, I think this is the city manager's favorite slide as well. So next slide, please. Okay, so transitioning to our capital improvement program. So we do a 5-year CIP, and this is the latest and greatest from the Tuesday night adoption of new projects and increased funding for several existing projects. So we have 96 total projects and about 720 million in total project cost. And we break them out by these different categories: circulation, infrastructure, parks and rec, and then housing. Of our total 720 million, just over 600 million is funded. So it's a very high proportion of our projects have secured funding, and then those that are unspecified funding at this point, that's where we'll be seeking grants or other funding opportunities later in the capital improvement program. Next slide. So just kind of highlighting the major projects within each category. Again, circulation projects, 29 in total, a little over 572 million. The biggest one by far, French Valley Parkway, Phase 2. And then we've got the Murrieta Creek Bridge at Overland, the Nicholas Road Extension, the pavement rehab projects. So we fund that each and every year, and it averages around $7 million per year. So that 14 million reflects this year and the next fiscal year, what our budget is there. And then the I-15 congestion relief project, I'm assuming that you guys are familiar with these projects, I would think, so I won't go into too much detail. Next slide, please. And then infrastructure projects, so a lot of the buildings, so the Margarita Rec Center, that's going to be underway here very soon, I believe. That'll be a great asset to add to that, to the TCSD rec centers. And then a renovation of the current CRC is budgeted at $8.5 million. And then we have the Santa Gertrudis Creek Ped and Bike Trail extension, and then the fiber optic communication systems upgrade is budgeted under infrastructure. Next, please. And then the park and rec projects, so total of 18 projects, a little over 36 million. And a lot of these were newly added on Tuesday night. So we still have the CRC splash pad and shade structure project in there. And then pickleball courts, we doubled that project from 1 million up to 2 million. And that's going to be a very popular project. And then we added the last 3 here, the Murrieta Creek Regional Sports Park. We added some seed funding to get that project going. It's not fully funded at 8 million, but we think it's a good starting point. The bulk of it is funded in the first couple of years. And then we've got the skate park and hockey rink at the Ronald Reagan Sports Park. And there was a lively discussion at council on that on Tuesday. So again, seed money to start the design and rework of what those two projects will be. So it's exciting to get the input from the community, and that definitely shapes how these projects will be designed and implemented eventually. Next slide, please. So the two housing projects that we have, again, this was on the council on Tuesday, where we added $4 million of funding to the Vine Creek Affordable Housing Project. That is a 100% affordable project, 60 units, right over here on Pujol and Main Street. And $4 million were added to the budget to make them more competitive in the tax credit market, so that hopefully they can get full funding and start that project relatively soon. And then in the uptown Temecula area, there's the Las Haciendas Affordable Housing Project with a little over $10 million of funding going towards that project, 77-unit multifamily, and that'll be a really great project up in that area too. Next slide, please. So I added this slide from last year because the City Council really did something that I haven't seen here in my career here so far, is really are starting to invest in our workforce. And this slide shows the trend in basically authorized headcount for the city. And you can see that ever since the Great Recession, the headcount has remained relatively stable, despite what shows in the green bar, which is the growth in our general fund budget. So over time, the budget has grown significantly. I think it's almost doubled since 2007-08, which is when we had our peak head count at 210 positions. And on Tuesday night, the council authorized the addition of 10 new positions, authorized full-time positions. So that would bring our head count up to 190.95 full-time equivalent. And those numbers do not include our public safety that we have through contracts with the county. So on the fire side, we have 71 contracted positions, and then police is 151. Included in the Tuesday night update was an addition of 5 police officers to that police contract, so that's reflective of that. And then we also have several part-time / project positions that come and go. A lot of those are seasonal, as we experience in TCSD with the summer programs, and some of those part-time or project positions are year-round as well, but those are also not included in that 190 figure. But a big significant increase in our workforce here coming in the next, as quickly as we can hire them. So let's see. With that, next slide, please. I think we get to the discussion questions. So here we are. As a commissioner, do you feel that the city's investment of financial resources is in line with the community's priorities? And again, if so, which programs and projects are most beneficial? And then if not, how could the city better align its community priorities or its spending with community priorities? So I will turn it back to you all and open it up for discussion.
Sure, great presentation. I guess, are there any questions first before we answer your questions? So, I had a couple questions. So I think you answered my first question on your last slide. On the early slides, I didn't see that the budget included staffing plans and expected growth, but I see now that it does. And how far into the future do we look for projecting what that staff growth will be like? Is it just next year we're going to add 10 people, or is there more vision for 5 years out?
So it's for non-safety staffing, our 5-year plans have always kept those positions stagnant. So we have not included additional staffing throughout that 5-year plan in the past. For safety, we have, for police, we have included extra officers to keep pace with population growth in our 5-year. But again, with the council discussion on Tuesday night, they're recognizing that investments in personnel and our workforce are definitely important and needed to keep up with a $700 million CIP and to deliver all the programs or projects that we have going. So we might change our projection philosophy a little bit this time around and start including growth in our head count. But in the past, we have not.
Okay. And I'm not a finance person, so pardon some of my questions,
right.
but is there a limit on reserve funding? I've done a little work with nonprofits where you can only have so much in the bank when all is said and done, but do you have a limit
Yeah.
or is there a philosophy on how much you should have and wouldn't want to have more than?
Yeah, great question. We do have a policy that tells us how much we want to keep in there at a minimum, which is 20%. We have two reserves. One is the reserve for economic uncertainty. So that's set at 20% of our operating budget. And that is used for things like a natural disaster, some big catastrophic, something that might occur. As far as I know, we've never in the city's history had to utilize those funds. They've always just kind of been held, that 20%'s been held off to the side. And then several years ago, we added a secondary reserve that's set at 5% of the operating budget. And that is used more for if we have an economic downturn, if we lose a major sales tax producer in the city, we can utilize those funds for a period of time before tapping into the 20% reserve. As far as a maximum or a philosophical amount, there really isn't one, but you do want to balance it because you don't want so much in reserves that you're not deploying that money to do programs and projects for the community. So, on average, we have usually had between 5 to 10 million or so above those reserve levels.
Okay.
Currently, right now, we do have a bit more than that just because of the better year that we just ended. So that money, through the budget process, will be programmed out over the course of the next 5 years.
Okay. And my last question was, you had the chart with the priorities, but then the pie, the sizes were different. Would we
Yeah.
ever, mid-year, reallocate from a lower priority thing? If, for example, if public safety was number one, if we realized we needed more there, would we reallocate and take from a lower priority to fund up a higher priority, like mid-year?
Yeah, the council would definitely have that prerogative to do so.
Okay.
All the appropriations have to be approved by council. So staff makes their recommendations, and if that were the case, if we were really in need of more public safety, we would recommend more public safety, and that would leave less amount for the capital projects or for asset management. So it's definitely a priority discussion that the council would engage in and appropriate it
Very
as
good.
they see fit.
Thank you. Other questions, comments, David?
Yeah, so along the same lines of the priorities there, you mentioned public safety equipment and non-recurring programs as one of the available general fund balance appropriation priorities. And I wanted to check if maybe, I'm sure you're familiar with Fire Station 12 in Old Town, and there's that state-owned parcel of land that is built on. Would the acquisition of that land fall under this kind of category? Is there some other account or funding mechanism that might be better suited for that?
It absolutely would fall under that priority. We have, in fact, I think it was just this fiscal year, we set up a reserve account to put money in over the next several years so that, fund balance would build in that fund so that we have money to draw upon when the time comes to acquire that building. So,
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. That was super informative, so I
Great.
appreciate it. I had two questions. Number one was related to the Arpa Fund. You mentioned there was about $7 million. I know there's some pretty stringent requirements of how that money needs to be spent. Are you able to provide any guidance of how that $7 million was allocated?
sure. Yeah, we're actually allotted a little over 14 million in total. We get it in 2 fiscal years, 7 million this year, 7 next year. And what we presented to the council and what they agreed to do is to utilize all of that funding for public safety. That's one of the eligible criteria. So that 14 million, 7 and 7, will fund public safety in the general fund. And then a like amount of general fund dollars are going to be utilized and set aside for what we're calling the COVID-19 Pandemic Community Reinvestment Program. So this is going to be coming to council, I believe, the first meeting in March. They've talked about it in concept, but we're bringing forward some more details on it in March. But basically setting up community grant types of business grants, nonprofit grants, $4 million of that funded the housing, the low-income, or the affordable housing project I just spoke of. So $14 million in this community reinvestment program, but it's essentially coming from the general fund because that money was displaced by the ARPA money coming into the general fund to pay for public safety. So less strings, less stringence, less reporting requirements because it is not federalized any longer.
Okay, that makes good sense. Thank you very much for that.
Sure.
The other question has to do with the staffing increases you mentioned. Specifically, we're adding 5 positions with police. What analysis did we use to get to that number, and was there a similar analysis done on the fire side?
We did, okay, so where the 5 positions came from, one of them is a new Civic Center deputy that's dedicated to just working in the Civic Center to increase our security presence here. And then the other 4 positions are to backfill the recently created Metro team. So the Sheriff's Department, or Sheriff's Office, created I believe it's 5-person, don't quote me on that, Metro team that is dedicated to patrolling the Old Town area. But to create that, they moved people from other special teams or out of patrol to create that team. But that team has proven to be very successful, so they want to keep it going. So these positions are backfilling those positions where they had come from. And then on the fire side, we are fully staffed on fire. We actually have 4-person per engine staffing model, which is a pretty high-end staffing model for fire. And all the positions are currently filled, and so they're...
Perfect. No, you answered it well. I just wanted to make sure that if we were dealing with an increase in population or whatever else there, an increasing PD, we would be commensurate with fire, but adding of a program and backfilling that makes perfect sense. So thank you very much.
And the funding for the new, I neglected to mention it, the funding for the new positions is coming from, it's really been a trend that we've seen where our tax base consistently has grown year after year after year and exceeded our budget projections each year, primarily through sales tax. I didn't spend a whole lot of time on our different revenue sources, but our largest revenue source is sales tax and Measure S, and both, I mean, they've just continued to grow. So they've created enough operating capacity to fund these positions on an ongoing basis. So we're not necessarily utilizing the surplus funds from last fiscal year to buy ongoing costs of personnel. We're utilizing the higher tax base to fund the additional personnel.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
More a comment than a question. Is that the right time, or?
Yeah, it's fine.
All right. First, again, I just want to commend you for that mid-year adjustment. I watched that carefully, and the amount of work that staff, all the department heads did, and the balance on it, it was perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
And so I think it's right on the money, and I think council did a wonderful job interacting with the public. It was quite a lot of people here representing their concerns, which was nice. For myself, I feel at a little disadvantage here only because I don't know what the wish lists are for each department. So, for example, I know that Pat got a $75,000 vacuum cleaner, and I wouldn't know to recommend that if not having a wish list, or like the 1.2 million in fiber optics. I think next year when we do this, if we could have some of those wish lists, we could help prioritize from our position what we think the priorities are for that.
Okay.
If I could comment on that, Jennifer. So, earlier you mentioned the fact that we have various master plans, and really the kind of the master plans that this commission would draw upon would be, for example, our circulation plan. That's an element of the general plan that shows the ultimate width and designation for each of our major and arterial roads. We've got a bikes and trails master plan that this commission would potentially draw upon. We are going to be with the funding that was designated for the fiber optic master plan. We are going to be developing that plan, and that's primarily for communications to our traffic signals. So the commission has several master plans that you could draw upon to be able to identify those priorities. And maybe something that we can do between now and, say, next year is schedule a time where we can present those master plans to the commission just for your information on that, just to get you more familiar with those plans. And then you would be able to use those to develop priorities for future projects.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. And just as a request for clarification, so our comments tonight on priorities should only be on traffic safety, or are we making them across
No,
the
well, I
board?
would say this commission focuses on those issues, so that would be potentially a focus. But I think the purpose of these meetings is really to get input from the commissions as representatives of the community. So if you see other issues that you know about or have concerns about, certainly bring those up and can be taken into consideration in the budget process.
Okay, well, I will say you presented the questions. Please answer these questions. So I wrote down what I thought the priorities were, and starting with Mayor Ron Temecula Safe. There are no bigger fans of safety than this commission before you. So safety, number one, of course. And second, I wrote traffic flow mobility, you called circulation. So on the same page there, and then I wrote family friendly, the activities. And what I saw in the budget was exactly those priorities. So I, as a citizen and a commissioner, believe that the city does have their budget, finger on the pulse of what the community wants and should be focused on. So I think it's really well. And I also will say I know every city doesn't have the financial health of this city.
Yeah.
So you can almost take it for granted when it just looks A+ perfect every year. But I know a lot of hard work goes into making it look effortless. And so just really, again, as a commissioner and a citizen, really appreciate that due diligence.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I would just echo those comments. I think if you'd asked me 6 months ago, when I was feeling a little less optimistic about the economy, I wasn't really looking forward to this year's budget process. But here we are with excellent news. One other thing one other ask I would add is there was an appendix added to the final budget document last year that really went into detail on the city's pavement management plan. And I found that to be very helpful for a couple of reasons. First, because it is, our road network is our largest and most visible asset. And second, it's because it's sort of the topic that I get the most questions on from residents. They're all curious about pavement maintenance and when is the road in front of my house going to be repaved and how much does this all cost? And it's really useful to be able to point back to that sort of authoritative source of truth on that. So I'm hoping that feature will make a return, and thank you for bringing us the excellent news.
Yeah, and I believe we added that as an outcome of this meeting last year, so it is a good thing to add in our budget. Yeah, thank you.
That's it. So if you don't need
right.
anything further from us, thank you so
Very
much
good.
for coming and spending time with us.
Thank you so much for your input, and I will summarize this and relay it back to the council, and appreciate your time.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. All right, we will then proceed to agenda item number 3, election of chairperson and vice person for this commission. I will entertain discussion or motion.
From my viewpoint, just for discussion purposes, you've only sat in the chair a couple months. You're filling a term. I think we're pretty good where we are. My suggestion, if others agree, is that we just stay where we are.
Yeah, I would agree. Obviously, very limited exposure here, but I would agree that this is a good layout we have now, and I don't see any need to change it either.
Yeah, and my comments from a couple months ago when we considered this, I think still stand, so happy with things as they are. And if that was a motion, I'd be happy to second it.
I'll make it as a motion, and thank you.
All right, second.
My motion is that you remain as chair, Skip Carter remains as vice chair for the coming year.
We have a motion and a second, so we'll roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Aye.
Carter, Maddox,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
and Sullivan? Thank you.
Very good. All right. So we will now move on to the feature presentation of the evening, the Local Road Safety Plan LRSP report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. 1 second, Eric, how do I get this back up? Video? And then from beginning. There we go, sorry about that. This presentation is in regards to the completion of the city's local road safety plan document. This presentation is going to cover the general aspects of an LRSP. It'll be a little refresher from when we discussed this in October. The process the city took in developing the RSP, a summary of what's in the LRSP. We'll go over the priority projects that came from it, and then in the end, we'll seek recommendation of approval from you commissioners on the document. As we previously discussed, what an LRSP is, it's a citywide data-driven traffic safety plan. The LRSP establishes goals, objectives, and emphasis areas in safety for a city. It covers the 5 E's of traffic safety. That's engineering, enforcement, education, emergency response, and emergency technology. The LRSP is a federal requirement for each city in California now in order to go for grants, so it's something that we had to do. And in terms of our LRSP, we actually received grant funding to perform this, to complete this document. So this image on the screen should look fairly familiar for you guys. It's very confusing, but it's kind of the roadmap of what we went through. It provided the framework for us to identify and analyze safety problems and recommend safety improvements in the city. What we did for this document is we identified stakeholders. We had stakeholder coordination. We met with Public Works. We met with police. We met with you commissioners, and we documented, recommendations and concerns that everyone had. As part of that, we also did a safety analysis. We looked at all the accidents in the city over the past 3 years, and we used that to help develop trouble intersections and segments, and from that, we developed countermeasures. How do we correct those issues? And that's what our countermeasure development came from. And then from that, we're able to develop the priority project for correcting those troubled intersections. And that was the general summary of what's in our LRSP there, the process for it. So we completed this document in February, the final draft version, and I believe you guys all had a chance to review it. But what's generally in the document is we listed our visions and goals as like an introductory for it. We talked about our stakeholder outreach. We relayed our collision analysis, our countermeasures. We listed the priority projects, and there's another section on implementation and evaluation. So once we installed these projects, we evaluated over the next few years and document, hey, did this actually reduce accidents, and is it a safer location now? So that'll be something we add to the document as we keep going forward. One thing to note is this document is a living document. We're required to update it, I believe, a minimum every 5 years, but we may be doing it every 3 years or so. So it's, as we get projects done, we want to make sure we start tracking it. And then in the end, we also had an appendix where we documented everyone's comments. We had a bunch of information, just a lot of stuff that helped to complete the document. What I wanted to focus on a little bit tonight is the 4 priority projects that came out of this first round of the LRSP. One of the main projects we're looking to, and these projects, we're looking to complete them with the next grant cycle. the HSIP grant cycle, which should be coming out this year. Typically, it's around April is when they release it, the guidelines, and then we'll go through this process of actually trying to develop these priority projects. We've done our legwork now. We'll write the grant once the guidelines are posted. So the first project we're thinking of doing is the Citywide Pedestrian Countdown Signal Head Upgrade Project. This will upgrade around 55 signalized intersections in the city. We're actually currently about to do 41 intersections right now and about to be in construction. We've ordered the equipment and we're going to get ready to do that. So it's another similar project. It updates countdown heads. We do accessible pedestrian signal push buttons. That's the vibrating and audible. And then with that also, we upgrade our traffic signal controllers, which is a big cost that we usually try to get completed as part of these grants. Second project we're looking at doing is traffic signal hardware upgrades. About 116 signals we're looking to do upgrades such as LED safety lighting, other equipment upgrades up there that we think are not failing, but need to be upgraded since they're old or something like that. We'll look at it. We'll deep dive more as we write the grants, but these are just general projects that we think we can win right now. So as we get closer to that, the grant will flesh out the details of it more. Third project is the installation of dynamic variable speed warning signs. This is, we found about 8 segments where there's crash incidents and they're around curves. So we're thinking we can have a project where we install radar speed signs, get people to slow down as they approach these curves. So that's another good project that we're looking forward to writing. Then the fourth project is a really big project. It's an upgrade. It's a traffic signal timing and communications upgrade. This is actually what we're doing right now with our current fiber optic project. We're going back to this same grant and trying to do the rest of our signalized intersections. This one is we update traffic operations and timing, and then also get communications equipment to get fiber. And in addition to that, we do traffic signal controllers and other fiber equipment. With these projects, they have a varying degree of city funds matching. The first 3 projects, they're pretty much 100% covered by the grant, but those guidelines may change when they release the new grants. They change the percentage match per countermeasure, so we always have to double check that. This other one's probably around 50%. I'm hoping they bump it up for the next cycle, but we'll see when that time comes. And with that, staff recommendation for the commission is to recommend the city council adopt a resolution approving of this city's local road safety plan. That concludes this presentation, and I can open up to any questions or comments.
None.
I had one real quick question. As it relates to priority project 3, do you have a breakdown of the 8 segments you're looking at for those dynamic speed signs?
It's in the report. I don't have it on the top of my head. We use this at the beginning to get close. We may add more or less depending on those grant guidelines. If the project's too expensive, we got to lower it in order to win the grant. So,
And those locations are the ones that had the highest accident history, is that correct, Nick?
yeah, they did have the highest, or they're locations that may not have an accident yet, but we realize that could be a safety issue, so we may throw it in.
Okay, yeah, that kind of leads to what I was asking, if we're solely basing on the accident data, or if we're being proactive, which it sounds like you are. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, I had a few questions, if I may. First of all, great report. I did take the time to read through it and learned a lot. And it was neat to see our inputs in there for consideration, and that, a little justification for, I think these areas are bad and the data proved it out. So
Yeah.
always good. One thing I saw a lot, a kind of a recurring theme, was most of our accidents, or a majority, are excessive speeds and rear-end collisions, kind of seems to be the theme. But I never saw that tied to distracted driving. And if you're going too fast and you run into someone, you didn't know when they were stopping most of the time. So I don't know if we've connected those dots, or if there's a way to connect those dots from the reports, but I think that would be interesting data. does it really go back to not a roadway problem to fix with something we build or do, but is it really a distracted cause in a number of those cases?
So when we get the data from it, there's all these levels of why was it an accident? Speeding, a right-of-way violation, just ignored a sign, things like that. I'm not quite sure distracted driving, like playing with their phone, texting, something like that, is an actual, I don't know, what would you call it? A cause of accident. I don't know if they
Causal
break it down that fine yet. Maybe the sheriff or someone could add to that. I'm not sure if it's in a police report where you get actually into distracted driving.
For the highway patrol, yeah, on our collision report, we have a spot on the second page where it has for distracted driving and handheld use and all that. So on ours, they do. I'm sure the sheriffs are similar because they take a lot of our accident investigation manual and use it for them.
That's
Yes.
on your SR 101 forms?
The CHP 555 form,
Okay.
it's our accident investigation form.
Yeah. Okay. My second question was, there was a portion of the LRSP where it talks about dividing the projects into these quintiles, right? And we have the top quintile. And it seemed to me that looking at that top quintile, because I did notice some of the places that were called out there are also school zones, which to me, if it's top quintile and a school zone, to me, that's almost an immediate call to action that we should be even prioritizing those at the top of that group. Is that being done?
When we work on these grants, you have to find a reason why there's an accident there, and then it has to kind of qualify under a certain countermeasure. So you really have to dig into it. So you notice something like that. So when we get to the grant, we would look into that, like, what is the cause of this, and is there an actual countermeasure that lines up to fix this potential problem? It's more of an art rather than kind of like a science. You really got to dig into it. And the crazy thing with these things is you need to have severe accidents or fatalities in order to get money to do the actual things. You could have 30 property damage accidents at a location, but that won't get you any grant money. You need to have a severe accident in order to get enough grant money. It's kind of a weird game. You have to play with it in order to do improvements to an intersection.
Right, I understand that very well. The one that caught my eyes, which is why I ask, is the segment on Rancho Vista Road right in front of TVHS. And if there's stuff going on there, I just feel like, boy, we should be out there watching what's
We'll
going
let Pat answer that one.
Yeah, so I can tell you that Councilmember Schwank has brought to our attention, and we've started a study now to look at both the Rancho Vista corridor as well as the Paba corridor from Margarita to Inez, and the speed limits and the striping and those two corridors there. So we are actively looking at those, and we'll likely have something for the commission to look at here in the next couple of months on that.
Very, very good. Super happy to hear that. The other thing, you mentioned the countdown timer heads that we're going to be putting in as one of the priorities, and that's primarily to, I guess, affect pedestrian behavior to make the good decision go or not go, right? I did see also in the report that I thought would be something good to do was this pedestrian lead time, where when the light changes, we let the pedestrians get several steps into the intersection before allowing, and that just seems like it's almost a free give on that, right? Because it's just changing the controller, am I right?
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up too, because I was going to mention that a little bit later, but that's actually another request that actually Councilmember Schwank made at the council meeting on Tuesday night, that we go back and basically update our inventory of missing sidewalk segments, as well as pedestrian lead interval timing, and kind of refresh a pedestrian improvement program, if for lack of a better term. So we've just, literally this week, started thinking about that, and that'll be another thing that we'll have for the commission to look at here sometime in the not-too-distant future.
And that's another thing I would say for those PLIs, right? Start at the school zones, right?
Right.
Everything we're doing, I say start at the school zones, because that's my big concern. All right, anything else, guys? We good? Yeah, motion.
All right, so probably heard just about enough input from me on this, but there were, as Pat mentioned, a couple ideas that came up this week at the city council meeting that got me thinking. One of the things that Mayor Pro Tem Schwenk brought up was transit equity. And as I was reading through the document here, there was a section on it that talked about the California Strategic Highway Safety Plan, more specifically the March 2021 revision, where they introduced some new guiding principles, including equity, which I guess brings us to 6 or 7 E's of traffic safety now, I'm not sure. And I was a little unclear on how the state defines that, how they evaluate that, how they score that in our grants, but maybe something to look at as this is a living document, and we'll be updating it in the years to come. And then the second thing, Pat had mentioned already was the sidewalk and ramp, crosswalk gap analysis, which seems like it really naturally complements the pedestrian signal head projects that we're going after. So it's maybe something we can tie together.
Yeah, and again, that's and I think it would be a good idea to put this on an agenda for the commission here sometime in the next few months too. As I mentioned, all these master plans for things that we have that you may or may not be aware of, our circulation plan, our pedestrian or our bicycle and trails master plan, our ADA transition plan, which is something that we did a few years ago that identified the need for ADA improvements at facilities as well as the right-of-way. So we do have a inventory and a plan, long-term plan, to address all of the ramps that don't comply with current ADA standards. So I think it'd be good if we just bring you a list of all these master plans that we have that are available and that you can draw on for identifying priorities and or at least just be familiar with. So.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I think just as the plan stands today, I'm very happy with how this turns out. Very excited to see some of these projects go forward. I think it validates some of the projects that we were already, applying for. And I'll be registering a very enthusiastic recommendation that this goes on to the council.
So is that a motion?
Sure, yeah, that's a motion.
We have a motion to approve and take to city council. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Eric seconds, so we'll do a roll call vote then.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Aye.
Carter, Maddox,
Aye?
Richardson,
Aye.
and Sullivan. Thank you.
All right, very good, thank you, Nick and team. All right, so we will now go to division reports. California Highway Patrol is in the house.
Thanks as always for having me here, letting you know what's happening with the Highway Patrol here in Temecula. So for services provided, again, trying to stay ahead and provide safety before people even hit the road. So child safety seat installations, we had 10 that we installed in our office. For those that are interested, it's every Friday is when we generally do those. We had one Start Smart class. Again, that's for teenage drivers before they start driving and for their parents to get involved all in the same classroom and learn about the rules of the road and some safe driving practices. And one community event safety booth. For enforcement activity, we had 544 citations issued, a total of 1,150 enforcement contacts. What we were trying to do monthly was a special enforcement detail with allied agencies. I talked about the last one where we get together with Menifee Police Department, Murrieta Police Department, and Riverside Sheriff. So we did one on January 22nd with Murrieta Police Department on Whitewood. Was successful, but we've also realized is right now all of the agencies are very short-handed. So to continue it monthly isn't going to be quite feasible. So more likely quarterly we'll continue those. January 31st, we did a detail. We've been getting a lot of complaints out in the French Valley area. So we were out of Winchester and Benton and Winchester and Thompson and made 16 enforcement contacts out there with a group of officers going out there and hitting the area hard. Upcoming, we're going to have a joint detail with Oceanside Area CHP and Temecula Area CHP, and it'll actually be, we'll go back and forth doing that hopefully once a quarter, And in March, we'll have them up here in our area, so we'll have a little extra enforcement on the 15 and 215 that day. As well as March 25th, we're going to do a joint operation with, let's actually extend down on the 15 all the way down to San Diego. So San Diego CHP, Oceanside CHP, and Temecula CHP, if you're on the 15 that day, somewhere between the border and us, you hopefully see more than one unit along the way. For our DUI arrests, a very good month for us. We had 47 DUI arrests. Normally, we average about 30 to 35, so I was very happy to see that 47. And even happier than that, one of the things that I've looked at, that I always look at every month, is how many of our collisions were caused by DUIs. Try and catch the DUIs before they crash. And we had 14 of our, so I didn't quite make my notes there. A little typo on my part. So 14 DUI TCs out of 47 arrests. So I was very, very encouraged with that. And keeping on our average with 5 drug DUI arrests. Traffic collisions were definitely down in January. 59 non-injury, 33 injury, and then it didn't make it on my count there, but we had 3 fatalities, and a total of 95 traffic collisions then for the month of January. I did an analysis on our fatal accidents for 2021, and it's the same as it has been for the last couple of years. There's not really a trend as far as, hey, we're having a lot on this one area of the 15 or on Ortega Highway. For the Temecula area, we have such a big area, it's really spread out. So our 3 fatal accidents for January, one was at a campground with a person that got out of her car, left it in drive, and unfortunately tripped and fell, and the car went over top of her. One at Winchester, Murray to Hot Springs, which was a big rig versus a pedestrian. A pedestrian was in the crosswalk, so that's under investigation. And then southbound I-15 south of Franklin up towards Lake Elsinore, a big rig parked on the shoulder with some mechanical problems, nighttime, and a car veered off to the side and hit the parked big rig. But overall, and I think I went over through the last meeting, our fatalities have been on a downward trend on 2021. So while we did have 3 in January, we're going to continue to work hard on it and try and keep it on that downward trend. And that's everything I have. Does anyone have any questions?
No, thank you for
Thank
the
you.
report. Appreciate it. We don't have fire or police here this evening, so we'll receive those reports and file them with the minutes. So we're on to traffic engineer's report.
All right, well, under the traffic engineer's report, since you've recommended approval of the LRSP, and that is one of the requirements now for application for the Highway Safety Improvement Program grants that we were talking about earlier. I was going to ask if Nick can summarize. We've got 3 projects from prior HSIP grant cycles that are at various stages of progress right now, and we've mentioned a couple of them, but if you could just summarize those 3.
Absolutely. So the first one that's actually out in construction right now is the fiber optic improvement project. We're connecting fiber optic to all our signals on Winchester Road, Rancho California Road, and Temecula Parkway. You may be seeing them doing some drilling on Rancho California Road near Margarita over the next week to put in some conduit. So that one's well underway. The other one we awarded to the contractor is the pedestrian head upgrade project. So we're getting ready to kick that one off. They've ordered the equipment, long lead time, so we'll be having a kickoff meeting with that one very soon. And then the other one is the 5 signalized, 5 modifications to signals where we're going to be doing protected permissive operations, those 5 section heads where you get permissive and then protected depending on the amount of vehicles. That's we're at like 99% design right now. We're getting ready to submit that to Caltrans to get that approved so we can go to construction, take it out to bid.
Good. All right. That it? Okay. One other question, I guess, for you. We have the joint meeting on March 8th.
Yes, yeah. And
What's our
so, I was going to cover that under your adjournment since we were talking about possibly canceling the March meeting. But yes, so the joint meeting with the city council and the commission is March 8th. So the next city council meeting, we're actually working on a presentation for the commission to present at that meeting, and we should have that ready by early next week. So we're planning to email that out to each of the commissioners to review and comment on, and then we'll have that ready for you on March 8th. And the thinking, and you can give us your input now on this if you'd like, is the thinking was, or is similar to last year, where we'd have a couple of the slides and sections for each of the commissioners to present, if that's the way you'd like to go with that.
Yeah, we discussed briefly before we sat down tonight, and I think that's our preference as well, so if you could set it up that way, we'd appreciate it. I guess,
So under your adjournment, and I did want to give you a couple of other updates here before you adjourn, but under your adjournment, if you do prefer to cancel the regularly scheduled March meeting, you just adjourn to the April meeting, and that's April 28th. So that would be the next regular commission meeting, if that's your choice on that.
so do we need a motion for that, or do we just inform you?
I think you can just inform us. It'll be
Okay,
fine.
I think you can consider yourself informed.
Okay.
We'll cancel the March meeting and proceed to April 28th.
Right, okay. Yeah, and just a couple of other reports and updates, and wanted to ask Ron to give you an update on some land development projects, but other just updates. So a project that's been underway for quite a while and was kind of shut down for a while due to some equipment backlogs was the new traffic signal at Wabash Lane and Temecula Parkway there, which will be the access to the park and ride facility. So they did get all their equipment in, and they're actually going to be remobilizing next week, and then hopefully it'll be about 30 days before that'll be completed and signal ready to energize. We talked about the request from Councilmember Schwank to look at the different missing sidewalk segments and various issues related to pedestrian circulation around the city. So we'll be working on that and bring that back to the commission. Councilmember Schwank also asked us, based on a citizen request, to look at the crosswalks in front of City Hall out here. So where the crosswalks across Mercedes Road here and potentially look at some options to make those more visible. So we're looking at that, and we'll have that for the commission to consider here fairly soon also. And what else did I have? I think that was about all I had. So I did want to ask Ron to update you on some current land development projects also.
Yes, thank you. Especially, it's good to see the commission here tonight, because we really appreciate your attendance at all the events. Saw you guys at the sports park. Really appreciate you being there to kind of break in our brand new sports park that was accepted by City Council. And if you haven't seen the lighting out there, it's really amazing. It's that just goes right down. It does not spread to the homes, so we're really proud of that. But there's 4 other projects I want to talk about, just because you saw that in the budget presentation. So the Las Haciendas Uptown project, that's the affordable housing project. It's actually apartments, 77 units. It's going to be just off Jefferson before Montezuma. You've seen Haciendas. So, that is unique because it is part of our Uptown specific plan, and that has actually broken ground already. So therefore, if if people start asking you, because I know the community does ask you questions at time, that is an affordable housing unit project. It is helping our numbers, our RENA numbers, with regards to affordable housing, so that's a good thing. But that did kick off. And then the medians out at Butterfield Stage Road. Somers Bend has been, the Woodside Homes developer has been, tasked with that responsibility as part of their conditions of approval. I know that there was a big break where they weren't working out there, and we had a couple residents call, like, what's going on? They had a little problem with their coordination with Rancho Water, but that's back on track. They got their laterals in. Those medians will be planted. They'll look nice by the end of May. So that's kind of where we're at with that one. On the south side of town, the Old Corner Bakery, that's now a Better Buzz coffee shop. That broke ground as well. So if residents start asking you about that. And then lastly, next Planning Commission meeting, we're taking, speaking of crosswalks and pedestrians and everything, we're taking Barrel Republic across the street here. So that's been the old vacant bar and grill that was there, the English pub. It's been a few things. It's been a barbecue place. Barrel Republic is coming in, and so we're taking that to get their entitlements, and then we should be seeing some construction on that corner and get all that cleaned up and get sidewalk across there, because currently, if you're on that side of the road, we see pedestrians go out, kind of a dangerous condition. We want to get people back onto the sidewalks. you know, and so that's the next project coming up at Planning Commission.
Very good. Thank you for that update. So I guess commissioner reports, open mic. Anything, guys?
I got a long one. I'll try to make it brief. All right. So the Blue Ribbon Committee met a couple times this year to discuss 4 of the community's core values. I believe we might have a slide on that. And so the first value, oh, excellent, thank you. Yeah, the first value up there you can see was a sustainable city. Water and air quality rose to the top of the priority list, as you would probably expect. We had some good discussion on preserving and improving the city's open space designated areas, and what that looks like in terms of new capital improvement projects. I think what the committee is imagining in the future is that we'll be able to reference this water quality management plan, an urban forest management plan that's coming up soon, the existing bikeways and trails master plan, and try to identify projects that really have co-benefits across all those domains. Under transportation, mobility, and connectivity, sort of the framing we adopted in that discussion was how we move people and not necessarily just cars. There were a lot of requests to connect various roads and trails, and then we also covered many of the topics that we sort of already covered tonight under the LRSP discussion. On the topic of a safe and prepared community, as I'm sure you would imagine, there's unanimous support for police and firemen, enthusiasm for community policing. The discussion also turned to all the ways that all the other city departments can help support public safety. And I think it's important when we say, we support the police, that it's not just like a performative gesture, but there's, we have to discuss what are we actually doing to support them. So to that, I think Old Town is maybe a good illustration of how the city has historically done this. It was a very conscious decision to move City Hall here and to build a town square, to locate the Children's Museum here and the community theater. The economic development team had a hand in helping to fill the vacant buildings at the time when Old Town was a ghost town. Community Services Department reinvigorated the parks and brought families back into some of those previously vacant public spaces. Public Works has, of course, worked on the Murrieta Creek Walk concept and, bringing new lighting. Technology has, livened up Front Street with music and public Wi-Fi. All these things really come together to change the behavior environment of Old Town and to reduce some of those contexts for crime. And I think, in that way we can at least give the Metro team a fighting chance to keep the peace out there, although there is, of course, more work to be done. And then moving on, lastly, on the topic of an accountable and responsive city government, we talked about data-informed community engagement using technology to expand our reach. And I think everyone there felt that the city has a lot of good stories to tell, but maybe the challenge is that it can be hard for residents to hear that above the noise. So that's it for my report this month. We'll be having one more meeting discussing the new core value of equity and then some of the projects and implementation in the coming months.
Very good. Thank you for the report. Eric, anything from you?
Nothing else for me, no.
I had a couple items to finish up. Let's see. First of all, one circle back to the local road safety plan that I failed to hit when we were there for my notes, but I did read about this high-friction surface treatment. And was very, as an engineer, I'm curious about that, because I know Inez and Rancho Cal is a place where we have some rear-end collisions, and anywhere you're going downhill, friction is reduced just by geometry, right? So I'm wondering if places like that would be appropriate for this, and are we working this into projects at some of these locations where we're seeing rear ends? Obvious solution is give people more friction to stop the car. Comment?
So I've written several grants in the past trying to win money to do this high friction.
Yeah.
They're very specific on where you can do it. You can only do it around curved areas, so kind of coming up to an intersection, not the best location. I haven't won one yet. It's very difficult because it's really expensive, but that's something we can definitely look into as we go through with the grants.
Yeah, because I mean, it seems to me like just from an engineering physics standpoint, if we're having rear-end collisions, especially downhill rear ends, that would be definitely a mitigation for that type of collision. So I don't know if the rules are only curves, I suggest breaking the rule. I think what would it hurt, right? To point out the other application for that technology.
I'll try to expand the limits of what we write on that one.
Be a pioneer.
Sounds good.
Very good. All right. The other things on my list. So a couple of locations in my daily drives. I now almost daily in the afternoon go Rancho Vista and to make a right on Butterfield Stage Road to proceed south. And I am amazed how difficult that is. I'm not talking about a left turn. I'm talking about just to make a right turn. And I know we've talked that long-term future there will be a signal there, but with that road speed now, I think at 50 or 55, it's high, and plus there is a sight distance problem because cars come from below and you don't see them rising up, and it's super difficult to find a gap to make a right turn there. Meanwhile, there's a line of cars waiting to make a left. So, is there something we can do there?
Well, the next modification there on Butterfield Stage Road, it will be a new traffic signal at where the school is, the Catholic school.
Avenida Lestanic.
Lestanic, yeah,
Yeah,
thanks, Eric.
Lestanic, okay.
Yeah, so that's where they put that left stop for the left turn. They're planning to proceed with putting in that traffic signal that was required when this expansion of the school took place, and I heard that was moving forward. I'm not sure exactly where that stands.
Yeah, we actually just got plans back in for that. They had submitted plans a couple of years ago. They were pretty close to approval. Funding got taken away from them by the school, but they're coming back in, I think about 2 weeks ago. So we've already reviewed that and hoping to get that approved pretty soon.
And
so
that
that-
will change the because right now, northbound or southbound traffic does not stop at the stop sign.
Correct. There'll be a full traffic signal there,
So that will create gaps.
Yes.
For Rancho Vista. Okay, that's great news. Thank you for that clarification. The other one I wanted to bring to attention, again, Rancho Vista, but westbound, west of Margarita, where the sports park is. I know we did a lane reduction there, kind of the road diet. But I've noticed when I pass there that for the very first turn into the sports park, while we're taking away that lane, I've seen many close calls of rear-end collision. Someone coming through that intersection, they don't realize someone is there without a left turn pocket trying to enter the sports park, yet our lines are basically putting you behind that stopped car. So I wonder if we created a problem when we put that striping in, that we're creating a potential rear-end conflict there. Maybe that's something staff there's plenty of roadway there to move the line a little next time around. But boy, I've seen several close calls there where people didn't realize someone was going to be turning to sports park.
Yeah, it's actually an item we discussed when we were talking about implementing the road diet, putting maybe a center median for left turns into the park, as well as some of the intersections that are on the north side of Rancho Vista. I believe one of them's Southern Cross. We've had some complaints there of not being a safe location for people to turn left into there, so it's definitely something we'll consider when we're laying out those plans.
Yeah, very good. Okay, let's see, working down my list. On the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, so I coaching at Great Oak High School now, and I drive by the one there, and boy, let me tell you, effective. I can't say enough about it. It's used all the time, safe. You can see it from a mile away. So, huge fan. Do more. Okay.
Are you talking about for the crosswalk?
At the crosswalk to Birdsall.
Right.
And I tell you, people see it, they stop and yield to those kids to cross. Super safe.
So we put one in on Rancho Vista for TVHS as
Yeah.
well, too. So if you haven't seen
I've
that
seen
one.
that one there, but not used. The one at Great Oak is used, repeatedly. So really good. The final thing I had, you talked about, pedestrians here in Old Town, but today driving into the garage, there were pedestrians exiting where I was supposed to be driving. So I feel like that is a place where we lack pedestrian guidance to know where to go. They've parked their car on the first level, and instinct is I walk out this entrance, but it's really a vehicle pathway.
Right, yeah. There was, or there is a plan that was supposed to be part of the Truax Hotel project that would create that corridor in between the Truax Hotel and the office building and kind of create or designate that as kind of the primary, crossing for Mercedes and pedestrian access to and from the parking structure. And that unfortunately just hasn't gone forward yet with that hotel project. I suppose we could look at adding some additional signage inside the structure for, directions to get to certain locations. And, I should also mention one of the projects that's part of what was referred to by Jennifer as the ARPA funding program is to actually do a wayfinding sign package or program for Old Town. And that is something that we're moving forward with as well. So helpful for drivers to get directions and directions for different things in Old Town. But, we can certainly look at if there's a need for some signs in the parking structure.
Yeah, and also now that Barrel Republic is going to get entitled, that curb return out there is going to be made to be an actual ADA ramp. It's going to be an actual return. So therefore, we had talked, we're going to have to, once they get their construction documents in, most likely we can put a crosswalk in there, and then we have to see how we can just kind of direct the pedestrian traffic. So it's something that's coming that we're going to look at with that project as well.
Okay, yeah, I think it really is just a matter of people get out of their car and it's like they don't know where to go and they see the sunlight coming in through the big hole. So that's where they go. But if just a sign that said pedestrian exit with an arrow to help to give people some guidance. I think that's where we don't want, if there's any place in the city we don't want a pedestrian run over, it's coming into our parking garage here. So, all right, that was it for my list. So if no one has anything further, we will adjourn the meeting and reconvene here on April 28th.